There are disappearances that leave behind evidence footprints in the snow, a snapped rope, a scream echoing into the void. And then there are disappearances that leave behind nothing. No sound, no struggle, just an unbearable silence. In 2013, a father and daughter vanished while climbing one of Wyoming's most dangerous peaks. They were skilled, they were cautious, they were prepared. And yet, they simply vanished without a signal, a trace, or a goodbye. How can two people disappear on a mountain they knew better than some of the rangers who protect it? And why were their only tools for rescue fully charged and ready left behind, untouched inside their truck? If you want to uncover the chilling truth hidden in the cliffs of Mount Caraway, then like this video, subscribe to Unscripted Tales, and help this story reach 5,000 likes. Because the answers you are about to hear will haunt you long after this story ends. It began on August 17, 2013, when Julian Mercer and his 19-year-old daughter Emily left their home in Laramie, Wyoming. It was not a reckless trip. It was not their first climb. Julian had spent years in the mountains and was known for his surgical attention to detail. At 47, he was a structural engineer who approached every climb like a blueprint carefully, mapped, redundantly planned, and executed with absolute control. He had climbed Mount Caraway before. He knew its mood swings, its false ledges, its violent storms. But this time, it was different. This time, Emily was going with him. Emily Mercer was not just tagging along. At 19, she had already earned the respect of local climbers. Smart, bold, and physically sharp, she had trained with her father since she was 12. This trip was more than just a climb, it was a final memory. A last wild adventure before she returned to college. Julian planned everything down to the hour. Their route, their check-ins, their contingency plans. Before leaving, he made a clear promise to his wife, Alina. By 6 p.m., 2 days into the climb, she would hear from him via satellite phone. If she did not, she would know something was wrong. That moment came, and passed. No call. Alina told herself not to panic. Maybe they were delayed. Maybe the weather disrupted the signal. But when night fell and the mountains stayed silent, she called the Fremont County Sheriff's Office. The response was fast. Within hours, Deputy Serena Locke was sent to the Cold Pines trailhead, where the Mercers had left their truck. It was still there, undisturbed, dusty but locked, parked with the same neatness Julian brought to every detail of his life. But inside the vehicle was a discovery that changed everything to satellite phones, fully charged, stored safely in the glove box. Left behind to anyone else, it might have seemed like an accident. But to those who knew Julian, it was something far more chilling. He never left anything behind, especially not the very devices designed to call for help from the backcountry. The question shifted from where they were to what had happened before they even got there. A full-scale search was launched. Helicopters flew low across the cliffs. Ground teams scoured the known routes. Trained dogs sniffed out every crevice. Thermal drones mapped the canyons. Nothing, no tracks, no discarded gear, no sign that anyone had ever touched the mountain at all. It was as if it had erased them. And then, as if the mountain was finished teasing, it struck. A rare storm, violent and early, swept across the range. Rain turned to ice. Search teams were forced back. The operation was suspended. The mountain went silent again. But not everyone gave up. Julian's oldest climbing partner, Thomas Gran, flew in from Colorado. Thomas knew the routes. No map listed the paths Julian had once talked about trying, but never dared to until now. With a small crew, he searched those forgotten lines. Quiet ascents, dangerous traverses, shadowed cliffs. Still, they found nothing. The mountain gave up no answers, and the world eventually gave up the questions. Seasons passed. Emily's room remained untouched. Julian's climbing gear collected dust in the garage. Alina kept the 2 satellite phones locked away, batteries long dead, but not forgotten. By the end of 2014, the case had gone cold. The mountain had won. But the truth had not disappeared. It was still up there, frozen in time, waiting to be seen, waiting to be understood. For almost 11 years, Mount Caraway held its silence. No answers, no rumors that ever led to anything real. Just a quiet trailhead, a truck long gone, and a mystery that aged with time. People stopped talking about Julian and Emily Mercer. Some believed they had fallen and vanished deep into an unseen crevice. Others thought their gear had failed or the storm had buried them for good. Their names faded from news reports, from forums, from casual conversation. The mountain had moved on. Or so it seemed. In late June of 2024, two climbers from Boulder, Colorado, Ava Monroe and Ben Carlisle set their sights on Mount Caraway. But they were not interested in repeating someone else's climb. They were known for charting first ascents, cutting new lines across impossible rock. Their goal was to take on an untouched western face of the mountain, one that had no official routes, no guidebook notes, just a blank wall of granite that dared anyone to try. 3 days into their climb, as the sun dipped behind the peaks and shadows stretched long over the stone, they spotted something strange. A single rusted bolt drilled into the rock. Then another, and another. Not random placements, deliberate ones. A faint traverse line led across the face. Ava followed it with her eyes until she saw it, a dark shape tucked into a shadowed alcove. Halfway between heaven and the earth below, a portal ledge, weathered, faded, suspended on aging webbing. They climbed toward it with caution, unsure if it was safe. As they approached, the silence grew heavier. On the ledge sat a tattered sleeping bag, rope coiled neatly as if someone planned to use it again, and a crushed red dry sack, its fabric stiff from age. Inside the sleeping bag, a shape that stopped. Ava cold, a skull, partially preserved, staring up at the two strangers who had unknowingly wandered into the final chapter of someone else's life. Ava's hands trembled as she radioed down. Her voice cracked when she said the words. "We found a body." What they found was unlike anything either of them had expected. And it did not feel old. It felt recent, close. Like the mountain had finally loosened its grip, just enough to let someone be seen again. Within hours, a rescue team was dispatched to the site. Ropes were dropped from a circling helicopter. A technical crew descended to the ledge, careful not to disturb anything. The remains were retrieved with precision. What came next was confirmation. Dental records matched the skull. The body on the ledge was Julian Mercer. But that was not all they recovered. Near the remains, the red dry sack held more than just old rope and frozen clothing. Tucked deep inside was a waterproof pouch. Inside that, 2 small journals and a shattered GoPro camera. The altitude and dry cold had preserved the paper just enough to be legible. The handwriting was Julian's. His journal began with neat line sketches of the route, notes on wind direction, gear checks, and timings. But as the pages turned, the writing grew looser, more hurried, more human. August 21st, ice on the northern wall, forced to take the southern line. Exposure worse than expected. Emily stayed calm. August 22nd, weather closing in, no signal. Set up the ledge. 1 anchor bolt loose. Secured it. Rations limited. August 23rd, Emily said she saw something last night. Could have been a shadow. Could have been something else. Neither of us slept. August 24th, my knee is injured. Cannot move. Emily offered to go for help. I told her it is our only chance. She left at dawn. If this is the last thing I ever write, tell Elena we tried. That was the final page. A goodbye etched in ink, left high on a cliffside the world had stopped looking at, and now a new question rose like a second storm. Where was Emily? The search would begin again, but this time it would follow her steps. Just days later, something buried beneath years of wind and snow would be found near a hidden ridge trail. And it would change everything. The words in Julian's final journal. Entry hit like an avalanche. Emily left at dawn. She went for help. After all the silence, after all the years of wondering, this single sentence brought something back that no one expected. If Emily had made it off that ledge alive, even for a while. Then the story was not finished. She might have reached the lower trail. She might have survived the storm. Maybe she had made it farther than anyone ever imagined. That possibility lit a fire. Search teams returned to Mount Caraway, this time with a different focus. They were no longer looking for the route Julian had taken up the face. Now they were looking for the way Emily might have come down. His journal mentioned something called the Southern Line, a path that had never been part of the original 2013 search grid. Why? Because it was not on any official map. It was a theoretical descent, one Julian had once talked about with close friends but never documented. It was dangerous. Narrow ledges, sudden drop-offs, blind curves through alpine brush. But now, it was the only lead that mattered. 2 days into this renewed search, a ranger moving along a slanted ridge paused near a patch of mountain laurel. There, half buried under twisted roots and crumbling soil, something glinted in the light. A bracelet, small, thin, rusted at the edges. Titanium, engraved with 2 names. Julian and Emily. Beneath their names, Caraway, 2013. It was hers. The brush around it had been growing wild for years. The bracelet had clearly been exposed only recently, likely from a combination of melting snow and minor rock shifts. But it told them one thing with certainty: Emily had made it this far. She had descended the ledge. She had survived at least 1 full day on her own. That discovery shifted the search even tighter. They focused on a chute below the ridge, a narrow drop where the terrain grew steep and chaotic. And then, on the 4th day, a flash of color caught. A ranger's eye, red nylon, caught on a broken rock. The same color jacket Emily had been wearing when she left with her father. It took over 6 hours to safely dig through the rock and soil. What they found beneath was devastating. The remains were skeletal. Time and weather had done their work. But tucked beside them was a small pack, torn but intact. Inside it 2 sealed energy bars, a compass, and a cloth pouch zipped tight. Inside the pouch was a second notebook. It was Emily's. The early pages were calm, diagrams, notes on direction, elevation changes. But slowly, her writing changed. It became harder to read, the lines shakier. August 24th, Dad said, "I have to go. I did not want to leave him. I am scared, but I have to try. I am going to follow the sun west. I think I know where the lake is." August 25th, I can barely see the trail. My ankle hurts. I fell, not sure how far. I miss Mum. I miss home. August 26th, I saw water. I think it was the lake. I was so close, but I cannot walk now. I crawled here. I think I am. Near the bottom, her final entries were almost unreadable. The pencil had scratched into the paper so hard it tore through. August 28th, if someone finds this, I did not run. I wanted to live. I tried. Then, one final page, just 1 sentence. Dad, I made it farther than we thought. Medical examiners would later confirm what the journal already revealed. Emily had survived for up to 4 days after she left the portal edge. She had traveled nearly 200 feet down a sheer and hostile face, likely with a broken ankle, no food, and freezing temperatures closing in around her. She had come within a short distance of the base trail, a distance that, under different conditions, would have saved her. But the mountain was not kind. It never was. And yet, buried beneath the sorrow of that discovery, there was something else, something about what Emily left behind that would change everything people believed about how this tragedy had unfolded. The truth about what happened to Julian and Emily Mercer was no longer a mystery. It had been buried beneath granite, silence, and time. But once it was uncovered, people were left with one final, haunting question. Why did it take 11 years to find them? The answers, once laid out, were not complicated, but they were painful. Because the truth was never hidden by the mountain alone. It was missed by those who were supposed to look. Back in 2013, when the first rescue teams arrived, they focused their search around the traditional ascent routes. These were the same lines used by most climbers: the eastern face, the northeast ridge, the tower base. All of them routes that had been climbed for decades and documented in guidebooks and GPS maps. The teams assumed that Julian and Emily had followed those same paths. And on paper, that assumption made sense. But Julian had taken a different approach. The southern route he chose was something few knew about. A hypothetical line mentioned in an old climbing forum. A route with no markers, no recent activity, and no records. It was steep, exposed, and only passable in perfect conditions. But Julian, ever the planner, had studied it for years. He believed it could be done, and he believed Emily was ready for it. The problem was, no one searching for them in 2013 knew he had chosen that path. That was the first mistake. The second came from the sky. Just as the search began, an early season storm rolled in across the Wind River Range. Snow and sleet buried the higher elevations. The air team lost visibility. From above, everything became flat. The ledge where Julian had taken shelter was camouflaged by snow and shadows. From below, it was tucked deep into an alcove no one had any reason to check. Helicopters flew within 900 feet of their location, but the ledge remained invisible. Thermal scans were used, but the cold temperatures, combined with the rock insulation, blocked any trace of body heat. The moment the storm hit, the window to find them began to close. By the time the snow cleared, the damage had been done. Search teams, exhausted and working with outdated data, missed subtle signs. A single climbing nut, found in 2016, wedged in a remote creek bed, had matched Julian's gear list. But because it had no serial number and was found far from the main routes, it was dismissed as unrelated. No one thought to follow that one thread dot until Ava and Ben, the two climbers who found Julian's portal ledge in 2024, had come with no maps, no assumptions, and no need to follow known routes. They were looking to make their own line, one that had never been documented, and in doing so, they unknowingly walked straight into the same path Julian had chosen over a decade earlier. Their approach was slower, closer. They climbed with their hands on the stone, not with data from the air, and that made all the difference. Had they taken a traditional route like the others, they would have missed the ledge just as everyone else did. It took two strangers, following a forgotten line, to find the truth that had been hidden all along. And while the mountain played its part, it was human error, wrong assumptions, and nature's timing that allowed that truth to stay buried for so long. But the final piece of the story was still waiting, a message, hidden not in a notebook or a device, but carved where no one expected it. A goodbye left behind in stone. The story of Julian and Emily Mercer could have ended with the recovery. With journals read. With names confirmed. With final words written on fading paper. But the mountain still had one last truth to give. Something more personal, something deeper. A message not meant for rescue teams or newspapers or cameras. A message left behind, not in panic, but in love. In the summer of 2025, Ava Monroe and Ben Carlisle returned to Mount Caraway. The same climbers who had discovered Julian's portal ledge a year earlier. But this time, they were not chasing a first ascent. They came with no goal but to honor. To climb slowly. To see what Julian and Emily had seen, and to leave behind something of their own. They followed the same bolts they had found. Stepped across the same rock. Reached the same shadowed ledge, and then, just before sunset, Ava noticed something she had missed the year before. A faint mark scratched into the stone, half covered in dust, hidden in the granite's natural shadows. She brushed it with her fingers, looked closer. 3 words, carved with something sharp but small, not large, not dramatic, just barely there. We stayed together. The carving was not deep. It had faded with time, but it was clear enough. Experts later agreed it had likely been etched by Emily, probably with the tip of a knife. Likely in the early morning before she left Julian behind to find help. It was not part of a journal. It was not for anyone specific. It was for anyone who would come to understand what mattered most in the end. They stayed together. The story touched more than climbers. It reached beyond mountain communities and rescue teams. It spread online, in classrooms, in homes. People did not see recklessness. They saw bravery, they saw love. They saw a daughter who went farther than she thought she could, and a father who let her go because it was their only chance. Near the trailhead of Mount Caraway now stands a plaque, quiet and simple. It reads, "In memory of Julian and Emily Mercer, father and daughter, climbers, dreamers, explorers, they stayed. Together, their journals were published later that year, not for money, not for drama, but as a tribute, a way for young climbers to study more than just routes and rope techniques, but to understand preparation, decision-making, and the weight of the wilderness. They became required reading in certain mountaineering courses. They became something more than evidence. And something else happened too. A small non-profit was launched in Emily's name. It was called the Ledge Project. Its goal was to help girls step into outdoor sports with confidence and support. It offered mentorship, climbing gear, and field training. All in her honor. Julian's wife Alina served on the board. She had spent years with silence and waiting. Now, she said she felt something else. She felt peace, because her husband and daughter did not vanish out of carelessness. They did not disappear without a fight. They faced something larger than them, and still chose to keep going. Together, but long after the journals were published and the gear was returned and the plaque was placed. One mystery still lingered, something found inside Julian's cracked GoPro memory chip, a clip that had never been seen until it was finally recovered and restored. Subscribe to Unscripted Tales and turn on the bell icon so you never miss stories like this, real stories that stay with you. And tell us in the comments, from where in the world are you watching this story?